In a recent Food and Drug Administration panel vote, it was decided that the health benefits of 4 popular oral contraceptives manufactured by Bayer outweighed blood clot risks, even after emotional testimonials from parents whose daughters died of blood clots as a result of taking the medication. It took a matter of minutes for independent journalists to notice what the FDA apparently did not wish to notice. The 4 panel members who voted in favor of the drug's benefits have ties to Bayer, the drug's manufacturer. Here now to discuss are my freedom fighters, Fox Business anchor, and my colleague, Lori Rothman, Newsday columnist Ellis Henican, and Jonathan Hoenig, Capitalist Pig Asset Management, the name of his company, obviously. Corruption at its worst.
Cozy, right? I mean, listen, I'm not going to pretend, Judge, to be an expert on blood clots and oral contraceptives, but I'm an expert on something else, and that is if you put the people on the panel who are making the decision, part of whose living is responsible to sucking up to the company, they're sure going to find those drugs are perfectly nice. It's corrupt in the worst kind of a way.
No matter how these people voted, there's an act of corruption. Should they really vote on anything in which they have had or are likely to have in the future some financial interest in the outcome? You're talking about human lives here.
And the thing is, Judge, look at the pharmaceuticals as an industry is traded on Wall Street. I mean, these are some of the richest companies out there. Investors are piling their money into the pharmaceutical stocks. Classic defensive play. So really, this should be very easy to reform because, as you just pointed out, it's a distinctive conflict of interest.
Jonathan, should the government be in this business anyway? I mean, if you or I want to take a medication that our doctor says might help us, why should the government interfere with that? Why do we need a Food and Drug Administration?
And, of course, Judge, as you know, we didn't have one until the early part of the 20th century. I disagree with the panel. I don't think it's a question of crony capitalism or corruption, but it's the natural impact of regulation to begin with. We've known for literally decades that millions of people have died waiting for drugs to be approved by the FDA. Here's another example of how when drugs are approved by the FDA, oftentimes, in fact, they're not safe. They're not good to take. But when we have regulators, we outsource our thinking. We allow those regulators and bureaucrats to make those decisions on our behalf, not patients, not doctors
Ellis,
who should.
You know that I agree with Jonathan in terms of the freedom-generated values and of the Constitution. But he does make a good point. The government system doesn't work. It's fraught with corruption, and people die because of it.
Well, yes. I mean, it is fraught with corruption. But let me pull both you and Jonathan back from the edge of the cliff here for a second. I mean, we do want some reasonable people deciding whether this stuff is going to kill us. And hearkening back to the glory days of the 1800s, do you know some of the garbage people used to put in their systems back then?
Why can't we have an insurance company look at this stuff and be on the hook? Because these young women women who died, whose parents gave this emotional testimony that the FDA just rejected, there's nobody they can sue. You can't sue the government for making a bad decision, but you could sue an insurance company that told you medicine was safe and it wasn't.
From the companies themselves, more of a public-private, the insurance company, the pharmaceuticals industry, the device makers, all of them, they should, kind of like the Olympics, right, where you have a judge from every country, a judge from every...
9.5.
I've got to do something about this. Hang on, Jonathan, I have to switch gears. As usual, don't believe the hype from the Federal Reserve when they claim profits out of the bailout. The Fed is announcing that it has returned some $77 billion in what it calls profits to the Treasury Department, an amount that very nearly breaks the 2010 record of $81.7 billion return. Yes, after printing trillions of dollars to make all the rotten mortgage-backed securities disappear, the Fed managed to make a few billion in interest payments. Good thing it's going back to the taxpayers, right? With Tim Geithner at the helm, I wouldn't hold my breath. This isn't a profit as we understand it, Jonathan. This is just paper money printed out of thin air being given to the feds and increasing the money supply. Am I right?
Judge, it's not a profit. I mean, profit implies a free market, a voluntary exchange. When Apple makes a profit, that's a real profit. When Exxon makes a profit, this is, as you pointed out, the government printing money, buying securities from firms that are owned by the government, taking the taxpayers' money, and then paying it back to them in profits. I mean, did Bernie Madoff make a profit? Of course not. That's exactly what this is on a much bigger scale.
Isn't this just a subterfuge? Funny money being made to look like the government is like the taxpayers are making money. This was all printed by the Fed, Lori Rothman.
All right, so I have to say Bernanke made a great point. This is the nature of buying fixed assets and better the funds, the proceeds go back to Treasury, then say China, who's also a tremendous buyer of U.S. Treasuries, right? But here's the thing. We don't have inflation right now, and that's a big threat in the system. And once inflation comes in, we just had Charles Plosser, Fed official today, say, look, we're going to have to hike rates. You're going to see the Fed lower its balance sheet and not turn a profit.
Isn't inflation the inevitable result of the introduction of hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars into the marketplace? More money chasing the same amount of goods, whether you call it profit or whether you call it printing cash. Ellis Henican.
I understand the argument, but you know what? I've been hearing it for a couple of decades now. It isn't happening yet. It doesn't seem to be on the horizon. And you know what? I don't want to turn down good money. I don't care whether you call it a profit or not. It's coming into our coffers, and we need it.
How could it be called good money? Jonathan, how could you even consider it money at all when it was just created out of thin air by the Fed?
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between money and wealth, Judge. I mean, money is literally paper. Wealth is the actual goods and values of services you can buy with that paper. And to your point, the more money you print, the more you debase the value of that currency. And as Lori pointed out, inflation is brewing. When it comes, let me tell you, they're not going to blame the government. They're going to blame the speculators for pushing up prices.
You can't really disagree with
all the
Jonathan now, can you?
No, I don't. But 77 billion, this is definitely a PR nightmare because it does look like, this is the Fed is profiting from the tax. So what do? I mean, they need to do something, 77 billion, kind of something to sneeze at when it's against the liability of our debt. Can they use it for deficit reduction?
All right, we got to go, Jonathan. Last question to Austin. Ellis, excuse me. Do you think they're going to use it to pay down debt, or do you think they're just going to spend it?
You know what? Or maybe do some good stuff with money, wealth. I want them both, Judge.
All right. Jonathan Hoenig, Ellis the Spender, Henican, Lori Rothman. It's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us, guys.